Master's MSc in Criminology and Criminal Justice from the prestigious University of Oxford. Mr. Vashisht is an awardee for the prestigious Bar Council of India Scholarship, Sedge Cross University of Oxford Scholarship, among various other prestigious awards, and honored throughout his career, especially for philanthropic causes. He has presented papers and published extensively in reputed international and national journals such as International Journal of Criminology, Oxford, Indian Police Journal by BPR&D, Journal of Indian Law Institute, etc., and has authored online courses for Eastern Book Company (SCC). At present, Mr. Sanjay Vashish is practicing law at the Supreme Court of India, Delhi High Court, National Company Law Tribunal, etc., and has been appointed as a Special Counsel for National Law University, Delhi. Mr. Vashish has also been at Specialized Training Center, Delhi Police, and a visiting faculty at various colleges. He is a member of the Innocence Project Canada, Indian Police Institute, and Foundation. He has delivered lectures at Law Center Delhi University, Hindu College Delhi University, CGO Complex, National Law University Delhi, Jamia Millia Islamia, and many other prestigious private universities and platforms. Mr. Vashish is a human rights activist actively involved in promoting rule of law across India and beyond. Now, I request our founder, Mr. Zia Ansari, to please shed some light on our today's topic before we start the session.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome on ZJ LRC, and a special thank and welcome to Sanjay sir. When I offered him this topic of victim compensation scheme, I found no one better than him because he's a person who have immense knowledge about criminology and victimology within India and out of India. So he can very well make us understand this victim compensation scheme in the light of inquisitorial criminal justice system, accusatorial criminal justice system, what is the foundation, why this criminal justice system, how it is working in India. So I found he's the best person to do this. And I welcome you, sir, and thank you very much. And it's over to you, sir, now. And please, anybody who have any question, last 15 minutes we will give for a question and you will be allowed to ask the question. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zia sir and Apurva ma'am. That was very kind of you. Have given such elaborate introduction. Yes, sir. May I request you to allow me to share a screen? I have also devised a small PowerPoint presentation for our attendees today. I am unable to share screen. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. Sir, you are mute.
So just hold on, I'm changing the settings and you will be able to share it.
Please.
So now try to do it. You will be able to share it. Yes, sir, we are getting your script.
This topic of victim compensation is very, very close to my heart because I've been personally involved in, I've been a victim of crime. And I think it's very, very important for us to share our own anecdotal experiences. We will also discuss who is a victim of crime. Is it only the immediate victim who is unfortunately present on the crime scene? Is it the victim's extended family, or is it beyond that? Can a society also be a victim of crime? We will discuss what it means to be a primary, secondary, or tertiary victim of crime. Who deserves compensation? What is the role of a victim in the administration of criminal justice? Everything needs to be discussed in detail. I have been a victim of crime. This topic is very, very close to me. in 90s, my father was then serving government of India as an officer, and he was attacked, and fortunately he was okay, but he lost some of his health, and the attack was so severe as to leave some daunting effect on my family and my mental health as youngsters. It was a very, very hard event for all of us. But that is perhaps what really inspired me to pursue my masters, and then the second masters in criminology and criminal justice at Oxford. I think we we should first try and understand what it means to be a victim and the role of compensation, because this is not only limited to monetary compensation. I don't really believe that any amount can compensate certain victims. We will discuss about victims of acid attacks, vitriolage. I really don't know if any amount will be able to compensate. These are very heinous crimes. Uh, Before we move forward, and I'm sure, and before we move forward, I'm sure many of you have been victims of crime. There, I'm sure you would know individuals who have been victims of severe crimes. But before moving forward, let me give you a brief insight into my work on victim reparation schemes and victim compensation schemes. I have been privileged and honored to have compiled the report for the Republic of India, for Oxford University and Oxford Pro Bono Publico, for a international organization called Redress London. This report was subsequently used at various prestigious international forums. I have written extensively on victims of domestic violence, victims of indoor crimes, and the need to compensate them. This article, as you see on the top right, has been published in York University in Canada. This is again, my focus has also been on acid attacks and the victims of acid attacks. The article on the top, on the bottom right, is one of the most cited articles on gender-based violence in Asia, as per SSRN and otherwise. If you go across these research articles, what I would really want to start with is by highlighting that we all have some limitations on virtual platforms when we try to explain you the limitations and the scheme out there. So what basically I'm trying to tell you is that the data is a major problem. Yes, when we talk about database, when we talk about when we talk about a robust database, see other countries, Scandinavian countries, European countries, other countries, they've devised a very strong database that gives us a great insight into the quantum of compensation which is being granted to victims of crime. But so far as our victim compensation schemes are concerned, I would still say they are in the process of being developed. Our victim compensation schemes are still evolving. We do have, state legal services authorities and district legal services. Then we have at national levels. We will discuss that, during the course of our presentation. But we really inhibits, prevents research scholars from coming out with robust articles. That is one limitation which I came across while drafting these, reports. Now, let us start by some introduction. Let us see what our criminal justice system really tends to focus on. The focus of the administration of criminal justice is mostly limited to penalty, pecuniary provisions, and the subject matter of focus is also the offender. So basically, our substantive law focuses on deterrence. It is focusing on actus reus mens rea. It is focusing on punishing the offender. Victim as such is not at the center of our penal substantive provisions. When we talk about the presence of victims, if you go through the penal provisions, go through Indian Penal Code, go through other penal provisions, you will see that victims as such are not present at the center. Moving on to procedural laws, we will see that even procedural laws are accused centric. When we say procedural laws are accuse-centric, some of you may say that of course they're meant to be accuse-centric because they're supposed to give you a fair procedural threshold that is there to provide access to justice even to the accused. But when we draw a comparison, when we draw a comparative analysis of our procedural law in contrast to the procedural law in the West, you will realize that there are very strong procedural laws for the victims of crime in the West. We will discuss that. I have come out with some anecdotes and illustrations in this regard as well. We know there was a United Nations Declaration of Basic Principle of Crime and Abuse Powers. This was basically the commencement of victim rights movement in India. The UN Declaration of Basic Principle of Crime and Abuse of Power, 1985. This kick-started the victims movement in India. Thereafter, series of reforms, both legislative, judicial activism, you would say activists, otherwise in the form of PILs have approached the Supreme Court, but more or less our jurisprudence is now being shaped through landmark decisions on the subject matter. This will also be discussed. Article 21, we know it's a very vast provision. This is for everyone, citizens, non-citizens, foreigners, everyone. But this is very, very importantly for victim support and compensation schemes as well. This has been a role model article in the Constitution of India because if we look at the Constitution of India in a holistic way, I have a copy right here. It's very, very hard to find a provision. It's almost impossible. You will have to interpret provision. You will have to interpret the directive principles of state policies or fundamental duties to say that it also embodies some element of victim compensation, so as to say that our constitution does not directly address the issues pertaining to victim compensation scheme that is there in the Constitution of India. We really need to understand and decipher that. We know judicial schemes have been in existence forever. There are plethora of judgments. I will be very, very happy to share my report that I had compiled for London Redress and University of Oxford on Republic of India. There have been grants of exemplary compensations. We know as early as 1983, that is 2 years prior to the UN declaration, in Rudal Shah versus State of Bihar, the Supreme Court recognized the petitioner's right to claim compensation for illegal detention. The Supreme Court under Article 142(10) granted rupees 35,000 to the petitioner. We know that judiciary has been obviously coming out with exemplary damages, but the only drawback of such, not a drawback, limitation, is that these are case specific reparations. These are limited to the case in hand. This is limited to that individual petitioner. It's almost impossible for the judiciary to come out with comprehensive guidelines, because that is again, we have separation of powers to whatever effect we can say we have separation of powers. There are checks and balances, but this is why we feel that even though there have been instances where Supreme Court has awarded compensation, it's a situation which is obviously delayed. You would also realize that in terms of hierarchy, in order to reach Supreme Court, you might have to travel from the trial court to the Supreme Court. An adequate compensation at the need of the hour is also again a need of the hour. So you should be given compensation when it's most required, not by the apex court when it reaches the hierarchy at the top. That is again a very crucial time gone into the bin for the victims. Because victims are required to be rehabilitated immediately after the crime is committed, not after the trial, not after the High Court rules so, or not after the Supreme Court's verdict. Victims usually require compensation immediately after a crime is committed. And we will see how 357A was inserted after 2009 amendment. We will come across those aspects of discussion as well. But we see that 154th report of the Law Commission also recognized that compensation should not be limited to fines, penalties and forfeitures. It should also ensure compensation. States should also ensure compensation from its fund. See, we know that Law Commission has been privy about this. Law Commission knows that the compensation should not be limited to fines. And this is, I'm quoting 154th report of the Law Commission, where a duty was almost, an onus was ensued upon the state to ensure compensation from its fund. Thereafter, the 226th report observed all victims need compensation, also recommended enactment of law to establish criminal injuries compensation board. Then obviously we know there is Malimat committee. So this is going to be the subject matter of our discussion today, just to give you a brief insight. Starting with the Constitution of India, we have briefly discussed how compensation is a very, very integral part of Article 21 of the Constitution of India. When we say right to life and right to live with human dignity, and you, as audience, as people who might have been victims or might have witnessed victims of crime, you will realize that the practical outcome is different from theory. When we discuss right to life being enshrined under Article 21, do we live in a utopian world where everything is perfect? No. But we need better guidelines, we need better procedural guidelines for this purpose. Now, so far as part 4 of the Constitution is concerned, Article 41, when we talk about directive principles of state policy. Now, Zia sir will better teach you about the enforceability of directive principles of state policy, whether they are enforceable in a court of law or not. That is something for you to learn if you haven't learned that already. But the part 4 of the Constitution of India lays down duties of the state to secure right to public assistance in case of disablement and in cases of undeserved want. So these are the interpretations of the Constitution of India. At the beginning, I told you how Constitution does not directly or specifically talk about victim compensation. However, so far as part 4 of the Constitution is concerned, it talks about right to public assistance in cases of disablement and in cases of undeserved want. You may say that this is a variation in semantics or labeling, but this is how we interpret the Constitution. This also talks about developing humanism, fundamental duties. If you see Article 51A, there is a fundamental duty as well on this aspect. There are certain judgments that we may want to discuss. I have briefly pointed them out in this slide. That is Bhim Singh versus State of Jammu Kashmir, Dr. Jacob George. So the 3 millennium judgments on this issue. Manju Bhatia versus NDMC, NDMCA 1998. So these are certain judgments which had started setting up the benchmark. Thereafter, a lot of judicial activism. Now, let us see provisions in legislations for payment of compensation to victims. What are various acts, legislations out there which are either designed to provide compensation or incorporate a provision pertaining to victim compensation scheme, irrespective of the quantum amount. Here we are looking at legislations. Now, this may either be by trial court or by tribunals which have been exclusively designed for this purpose. There has been a recent gas leaks tragedy, so you might be interested in Bhopal gas leak disaster processing of claims act 1985. Then there is Consumer Protection Act, Fatal Accident Act 1855, Indian Railways Act 1989, Prohibition of Offenders Act. We will see how admonition and probation of offenders also has a provision for victim compensation schemes. We will also see how plea bargaining, starting section 265 of the CRPC, also incorporates victim compensation. We will see victim compensation is a massive topic. I would not be able to cover everything in 1 hour. I think this is a topic vast enough to take a week or two at least to discuss in entirety. But the idea is to give you a comprehensive understanding of how it functions in our country, how to apply for the claim. Because as a lawyer, I really want you to understand the practical aspect as well. Theory, I'm pretty much is out there on YouTube, and otherwise you may come across various articles. But the idea is to give you an insight which you may not be otherwise be given on theoretical platforms. Now, this is one way. Then you have Sexual Harassment Act 2013, Prohibition of Sexual Harassment at Workplace, Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005, Motor Vehicle Act 1988, CRPC, we will discuss sections 250, 357, 358, 359, so on and so forth. But these are, in a gist, provisions or legislative provisions which talk about or address the issues pertaining to victim compensations in India. Now, let's discuss the statutory scheme. Uh, Dear participants, towards the end, we will also discuss how victim compensation in terms of procedural fairness and amount is done in United States, Canada, and Europe. That is also going to be the subject matter of our discussion to give you a better insight as to how these things work in other jurisdictions. Now, so far as the statutory scheme is concerned, we know there is a growing concern for compensation to victims of crime. So, Section 357A was inserted in CRPC in 2009 to give effect to victim compensation scheme. So, the scheme made way for an institutionalized payment of compensation to the victim by the state for any injury caused to him or her by the offender. The prior provision 357 was basically towards the end of the trial by the court out of the penalty. That was one limitation of 357. But so far as 357A is concerned, it has a very, very massive scope, much broader scope than 357 in general. Now, the responsibility has been imposed on the state to create and maintain a fund for this purpose. Victim compensation scheme come in use when the compensation received by the accused is inadequate or is not received at all due to acquittal or discharge or accused not being traced. Again, the former provision would not be able to grant compensation in cases of acquittal or discharge. But merely an acquittal or discharge does not ipso facto imply that the victim has not been victimized, that the family and the loved ones of the victims have not been victimized. This is how the statutory scheme for victims have evolved in India. Now, we know that there could be court's order for additional compensation over and above the amount payable under 357. So, out of the penalty, now the compensation which is given out of the penalty by virtue of 357 CRPC, the courts can also order additional compensation other than this. Under 357B CRPC, in cases of acid attack and gang rape, the compensation by state will be over and above the fine compensation payable to the victim. The District Legal Services Authority (DLSA) and the State Legal Services Authority has been authorized to decide the compensation amount subject to the maximum limit prescribed by the state. There is a threshold. There are also guiding factors that we will come across. Apart from the compensation, Section 357A addresses the immediate need of the victims for first aid, medical needs, or interim relief. This is a very vital part. Usually, the compensation was limited to the end of the trial. In my opinion, that is a very belated stage. But 357 has also allowed a provision for interim compensation. So far as the medical needs of the victim is concerned, you will see that in cases of acid attacks, there have been so many policies now, so many decisions which would tell you that acid attack victims are to be treated free of cost by any hospital where they are taken. Interim compensation is to be awarded to such victims, be it acid attack, rape. So 357A somehow overcomes the problems which were otherwise prevalent in 357 and prior victim compensation schemes. Pursuant to this legislative amendment, after initial reluctance, you see, a law or a guideline or a report of the Law Commission does not imply that there shall be an immediate reform in the compensation scheme. That is not how it functions. So there was a problem. But in Suresh versus State of Haryana 2014, the states notified the scheme. Almost all states and union territories have now set up victim compensation scheme for the payment of compensation and other relief to the victim and their dependents. This is now functioning this way. Now, before we move any further, just a second. Now, before we move any further, let us try to understand some criteria. How is the compensation determined? What is the criteria for the compensation? Let's understand the basic parameters which have been laid down for compensation. there is no rule or guideline for determining the amount of compensation. The maximum amount has been prescribed by the state. But so far as Delhi is concerned, Delhi has laid down few factors to be considered before awarding compensation. Now, the compensation is awarded on these parameters: gravity of the offense, severity of mental and physical harm or injury suffered, expenditure on medical treatment, mental health, funeral expenses, travel expenses, loss of educational opportunity, loss of employment, relationship of victim and offender, crime as an isolated incident or series of incidents, pregnancy, contracted STD, HIV as a result of the offense, financial condition of the victim is also taken into account. In case of death, no, whether there are dependents or no dependents, the age and the income. Again, it has been left open. Any other factor which may be considered by DLSA or State Legal Service Authority. These are basic parameters which have been laid down while considering the quantum of compensation in a given situation. This is a basic chart. We will share these details. This basically prescribes the minimum amount of compensation which is payable to the victims. You will see acid attack, there is 3, but so far as the national scheme is concerned, you will see there is even a 10 lakh compensation, 7 lakh. So again, this is the basic minimum which has been prescribed. I will be happy to share these links and all these files and PDFs with Zia sir if it could be circulated amongst the audience towards the end. This will be discussed accordingly. For death, the minimum compensation 2 lakh, partial disability 40% to 80%, 1 lakh, burns affecting greater than 25% of the body, including acid attack cases, 2 lakhs. So the list continues. It was impossible for me to incorporate all the instances on one screen. So this is just as an illustration. It's very important that we discuss compensation scheme for women victims, survival of sexual assault and other crimes. I have worked extensively on acid attacks. I had also had the opportunity to once draft a detailed project report for the Bureau of Policy Research and Development (BPRND) on acid attacks, and money obviously can't undo as to what has happened. You know, it is a crime which has its influence on the society at large. It really goes in deep inside our moral values. We are really disturbed collectively so far as acid attacks are concerned. But so far as victim compensation schemes are concerned, now the courts, the government, the legislature, the executive, they are all devising special policies for victims and survivals of such heinous crimes, especially crimes against women, so far as these schemes are concerned. Now, the Supreme Court in Nipun Saxena versus Union of India suggested NALSA to set up a committee of 4 to 5 people who can make model rules for compensation for victims of sexual offences and acid attack. I believe our ASJ, Ms. Pinky Anand, Additional Solicitor General of India, is now heading the committee. Is a part of the committee, which basically took suggestions from various stakeholders and submitted compensation scheme for women victims, survivors of sexual assault. On 24th April 2018, before the Honorable Supreme Court of India, then basically a scheme has been finalized now for such victims of heinous crimes. Now, there has been a substantial shift in the approach towards victims of crime in India. The efforts to give speedy compensation to victims are obviously applaudable. We are now focusing on expeditious compensation to victims. The immediate first aid, that was the need of the hour, to be able to prescribe immediate first aids to individuals and victims. So basically, the amount which was then payable to the victims immediately has now become a norm. The shortcomings are again compensation amount being very less and inadequate. That does really hinder how victim compensation is to work. You will also realize that the ability of the accused to pay would also be a consideration. So far as penalty which has been prescribed upon the offender and the amount of compensation which is again directed to the accused to reimburse the victim, that is also to be considered. Now, there is again lack of uniformity across states, which makes the mechanism unfair and unjust. Some states have better provisions or are able to impart better victim compensation schemes in contrast to other states. That also leads to a little bit of disparity, because uniformity is the need of the hour. Now, so far as this entire situation is concerned, some schemes are better than no schemes. It's always better to have some victim compensation schemes out there for those who will otherwise not be able to. See, you will all appreciate one problem over here, that we tend to label the victim as a wrongdoer. The problem is blaming, naming, and shaming the victim. That is one way of looking at things. You might have come across various news articles or otherwise who have blamed the woman for being raped. For instance, you will have all these individuals come before a television show, or they surface on some news channel and say that why were they wearing clothes of this kind? Why is it that they were out at? So these compensation schemes are very, very pertinent, because the society tends to stigmatize and isolate such victims there, and these schemes form a very, very pertinent part of their rehabilitation program, because the purpose of victim compensation scheme is to rehabilitate and reintegrate even a victim back to the society. Please understand, when we say this for the accused, rehabilitating and reintegrating them back to the society, our victims are also ostracized. Our victims are also stigmatized in a given society. Our victims also face hardships which are to be faced by the accused. So stigma is not a unilateral sword. Stigma has now become a sword which tends to affect, influence both victim and the offender. That is why our victim compensation schemes are required to be built, transformed into better shapes every day. That is the need of the hour. Now, moving on, what has happened? Sorry, just a second. There is a second slide which we'll have to open. I'm sharing a new screen. I hope the file is visible.
Yes, sir.
Now, moving on to the procedure for the grant of compensation. Let's scrutinize if the procedure is people friendly, victim friendly, or is it like any other bureaucratic procedure which takes a lot of. See, victims are already victimized. They are victimized by the society, by the media, by so many things. They are victimized by the act of the accused. So we want a procedure which is very, very liberal. We want a procedure which does not require a lot of hardships. We want a uniform procedure which is easily applicable and applicable by the victim of crime. We would want to stay away from such procedures which takes a lot of bureaucratic time and delays for the victim to generate such funds. Now, so far as procedure for grant of compensation is concerned, there has to be a recommendation in certain cases from the court for compensation under subsections 2, 3 of section 357A, or an application. We know that the court suo motu can recommend compensation under such provisions. Now, so far as 357A of subsection 4 is concerned, this could also be generated through an application. There could be an application by the victim of crime. Now, looking at the application, this is how the application is to be made. So far as mandatory reporting of FIRs are concerned, SHOs, Superintendent of Police, Deputy Commissioner of Police shall mandatorily share soft copy or hard copy of the FIR immediately after its registration with the State Legal Service Authority, District Legal Service Authority, for the commission of offences covered in the scheme, which includes Section 320. This is again about acid attacks: 326A, 354A to 354D, 376A to 376A, E, 304B, 498A, in case of physical injury covered in the schedule, so that State Legal Service Authority and District Legal can, in deserving cases, this is very important, may suo motu initiate preliminary verification of facts and purpose of grant of interim compensation. A duty has been casted upon the Legal Service Authority to even suo motu take cognizance of such FIRs and grant compensation to individuals. An application for the award of interim and final compensation can be filed by the victim or dependents. We will appreciate that there could be cases where the dependents have to move forward with the application, as the victim may be incapacitated by virtue of the injury or death in such cases, where the direct immediate primary victim will not be able to apply for compensation. So even dependents or even the SHO, station house officer of the area, can file before the concerned State Legal Service Authority and District Legal Service Authority. It shall be submitted in Form 1 along with a copy of the FIR or criminal complaint of which cognizance is taken by the court, and if available, medical report, death certificate, wherever applicable, a copy of judgment, recommendation of court, or if the trial is over. So far as application is concerned, we see wide powers have been granted to the victims, to their immediate dependents, or even the station house officers to file an application in cases of compensation under 357A subclause 4. I believe I still have 12 more minutes in terms of speaking.
Sir, you can take more minutes also. We are not strict towards 1 hour. We can take it to 10 to 15 minutes more also. Don't worry.
Right. So I will try to, although I will try to stick to the timeline because the scheme is very vast.
Yes. Sir.
Now, continuing with the procedure, we know there is a procedure. Anybody can apply. Dependents can apply. SHO can apply. Anybody can apply. Now, the inquiry as contemplated under subsection 5 of 357A of the code shall be completed expeditiously, because we know it is very, very important. See, victim cannot be left in abeyance. The victim cannot be left on the behest of the government. The victim, just a second. Yeah, so the victim cannot just wait forever and ever to wait, for the compensation. There has to be a specific time frame. Now, so far as acid attack victims are concerned, so far as the inquiry is concerned, so far as section 357A subsection 5 is concerned, the inquiry which is contemplated under the provision shall be completed expeditiously. It has to be completed expeditiously, and the period shall not exceed beyond 60 days from the receipt of the claim or petition. There is a specific timeline. There is a timeline. So 60 days is the maximum time which has been prescribed under the provision. Provided, but there is a proviso to this. Provided that in cases of acid attacks, an amount of rupees 1 lakh shall be paid to the victim within 15 days of the matter being brought to the notice of DLSA. 1 lakh within 15 days. Now we know after Lakshmi's case and other activisms and Supreme Court mandates, acid attack victims are to be given immediate treatment. There could be a provision of interim. So here interim compensation which is immediately payable is rupees 1 lakh. The order granting interim compensation shall be passed by DLSA within 7 days of the matter being brought to its notice. We see how the DCP, SP, SHO were duty bound once the FIR is registered to report it to the DLSA or State Legal Service Authority, and they within 7 days are bound to release these compensations. The matter has to be decided for interim compensation in such ways. And the SLSA, State Legal Service, shall pay the compensation within 8 days of passing of the order. Thereafter, an amount of rupees 2 lakhs shall be paid to the victim as expeditiously as possible and positively within 2 months of the first payment. Again, going back to the 2-month time, 60 days therefore becomes a norm so far as relinquishment or release of compensation to the victims in need is concerned. Now the order has to be placed on record. Let's say there is an order of interim or final compensation passed under the scheme. It shall be placed on record of the trial court so as to enable the trial court to pass an appropriate order of compensation under section 357 of the code. Under section 357 of the code CRPC, I am not talking about 357 ABC. Here we are talking about the parent provision 357. The court is empowered to consider such. The courts are empowered under this provision to consider compensation which has already been granted while finally deciding the compensation under the scheme. So the courts are empowered. A true copy of the order shall also be placed to the investigating officer in the case the matter is pending investigation, and also to the victim and defendant. There is a lot to be discussed about the disbursement of compensation. So far as disbursement is concerned, there are categories, cases where there are minor victims, there are major victims, minor victims. How does it classify between the nature of victims? That is also to be discussed. In case of a minor, 80% of the amount of compensation shall be deposited in the fixed deposit account and shall only be drawn on the attainment of the age of maturity, but not before 3 years of the deposit. We know minors are incapacitated from taking decisions which are in their benefit by virtue of their mental growth. Here, it has to be deposited in the form of a fixed deposit. Again, we are on the practical aspect over here. We are discussing how the amount is usually disbursed. We see this happening at the JJ board, Juvenile Justice Board, or the courts as well. Again, the scheme goes on to talk about FDRs and other things. We have already discussed this interim relief which is to be payable. This is a vast topic, recovery of compensation. There's a lot of discussion and discourse on recovery if it turns out that the claim was false. There may be cases where a false claim has been filed. We know that so far as SC/ST Act is concerned, there was a discussion that most of the cases have been filed merely for the want of compensation. There was absolutely no discussion on that aspect. So here there could be recovery as well. Minor victims, in the case the victim is an orphaned minor without any parent or legal guardian, the immediate relief or interim compensation shall be disbursed to the bank account of the child open under the guardianship of the superintendent child care institutions where the child is lodged. In the absence thereof, limitation becomes a very important subject matter before I open the floor for questions. Now, so far as limitation is concerned, under the scheme, no claim made by the victim or a dependent under subsection 4 of 357A shall be entertained after a period of 3 years from the date of occurrence of the offence or conclusion of trial. Now, this itself is a very vast scope of limitation. because there is a substantial time between the commencement and the conclusion of trial as well. But the scheme has been given a very liberal limitation. You might want to note that is, it should not be entertained after 3 years from the date of occurrence of offence, in case the trial is not concluded, or conclusion of trial. So what is important there is that there has to be a trial. So far as the limitation is concerned, so far as the limitation to function in this way is concerned, there is a provision in deserving cases, so far as the application can be made in this regard for reasons to be recorded, that delay can also be condoned by SLSA and DLSA. So this is not a very strict limitation. We know these are victims of crime that we are dealing with. Victims may be incapacitated with their injury, their mental health may not allow them, or they may not be aware of such compensation schemes. So in deserving cases, this delay can also be condoned. An appeal by a victim or a dependents who are not satisfied with the quantum of compensation, because quantum of compensation is almost always a subject matter of challenge. Quantum of compensation is always key to such instances. Now, quantum of compensation awarded by DLSA can be appealed within 30 days from the date of such receipt of the order. The procedures are always prescribed. I am not going to go through the entire procedure to file an appeal, but so far as the mechanisms are concerned, these mechanisms are there. We know these mechanisms function, but so far as comparison from the West is concerned, we will really need to discuss how it works. A lot of surveys have been carried out in United States and other countries which talk about victim compensation. Victim compensation is not limited to monetary aspect. Dear participants, it is not limited to money. It is not limited to hospitals, medical treatment. It is not limited to the monetary or the material aspect. Victims have time and again stated in their surveys that they are required, it is required that they are also given a say in the administration of criminal justice. Victims want direct participation in the administration of criminal justice. It is achieved in UK and US through victim impact statement and victim personal statement. VIS or VPS. It is called victim impact statement or victim personal statements. We know after Nanavati's matter, we abolished jury in India. Some trials in the United States and the West are jury trials. Victims have a say so far as aggravating and mitigating circumstances at the sentencing stage is concerned. Victims feel that if they're given some say in the sentencing or in the trial, they will feel compensated. They will feel that the wrong which has been committed against the victim in this rights discourse is going to be rectified. So at times this is not monetary, this is much more than that. Imagine a situation or a hypothetical anecdote where an individual who happens to be an industrialist is offered a compensation of 2 lakhs or 1 lakh by the State Legal Service Authority. That wouldn't make much of a difference. Or in the cases of acid attacks, where the life of the victim more or less has been affected on long-term basis. Will money do justice? No. These victims, they say they want a say in the criminal justice system. So in the West, they have now devised modus operandi where after the conclusion of the trial, once the accused is pronounced guilty, victims are invited to the trial to deliver their victim impact statement and victim personal statement. The reason I am using victim impact statement and victim personal statement is that VPS, one is used in US, the other is for UK and courts in European Union. Obviously, after referendum, there has been a Brexit. But the idea is to enable the court to understand as to how victims have been aggrieved by the crime, how it has shaped and changed their life forever. This gives a gives an insight to the victim about the administration of criminal justice and becomes a need of the hour. Likewise, there have been a lot of debates to allow such instances to function in India, as this would also enable the courts. This would enable our authorities to decide on the quantum of compensation. We don't have this in India. We do not have victim impact statements or victim personal statements in India. I urge all of you to try to YouTube victim personal statement and victim impact statement. There are real court illustrations out there where victims of crime, even homicides or murders, have surfaced, where the family members of those who were murdered have now come and they give their passionate statements as to how the crime has changed their life forever. So victim compensation, more or less, again, it's a vast topic. There are so many cases like Ankush Gaikwad, where the trial court is supposed to record reasons, while then again the Suresh and another, where before taking cognizance, the trial court has to record reasons pertaining to the victim compensation, if at all interim compensation is to be given. There are a plethora of judgments on victim compensation. It's not plausible to go through all these cases right now, but judiciary along with the legislature and the executive are trying to evolve parameters and guidelines so far as the scheme is concerned. The quantum of compensation, the mandatory minimum has already been prescribed by the DLSA, SLSA, and even national compensation schemes, because the state government and the central government have to work together to work with the compensation, with the quantum of compensation. It's impossible. Again, the courts have also come out with exemplary, so in Galdor, MJ, Cherian versus Union of India, the state was ordered to pay a compensation of 2.5 lakhs Indian rupees to the nuns raped by perpetrators. Now, this is one illustration. I started my report with this case, where even the courts have granted exemplary compensation to victims. So, as lawyers, if you want to practice law, you can always request the court, trial court, high court, supreme court, at any stage, to either enhance compensation or grant exemplary compensation. Courts have done this, and courts are empowered over and beyond the compensation which is to be deducted out of the penalty amount paid by the accused under section 357 of the CRPC. Now, lastly, I would say that so far as victim compensation is concerned, the critics are as follows: that victims are either required to actively participate even in seeking compensation. This should be done away with. State should be strictly duty bound to approach the victim themselves. So far as victim compensation is concerned, there should be absolutely no requirement from the victim. Two, the quantum needs to be evolved. The quantum has to be seen in light of the globalization out there. Everything is so expensive. The quantum is often considered to be inadequate. It has to be seen in larger picture, that the victims and their family members should also be considered. See, when we talk about victims, we talk about primary victims, we talk about secondary victims. Secondary victims are usually the family members, the extended family. Let's say if there is a victim of acid attack, the entire family is bound to suffer. Then the tertiary victims, the society. But now there is a debate that even the secondary victims of crimes are required to be considered by the victim compensation schemes, which are otherwise not considered. The idea is to only reparate the direct victim of crime. That is what we want to deviate from. We want to see the larger picture now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It was really a wonderful, enlightening session, and floor is open for the question. Anybody who want to ask question, please raise your hand, and I will unmute you. Right. ठीक है. Kiran Baroa ji, I am asking you the question. ठीक है. You are unmute. You can ask the question to sir.
Good afternoon, sir. So there was a question related to the 154th report, which also stated that the state would also pay some kind of compensation to the victims.
Hello. Yeah, can you please repeat that? Your voice was cracked.
Hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. In the 154th report, it was also said that the state would also pay the compensation to the victims, sir. Sir, can it be seen in this way that if the accuser is also eligible to pay the compensation in a way, instead of the state paying the compensation. Like if the accuser is financially strong enough to pay the compensation, then why does the state need to pay the compensation? Like, because it's the fund of the state, right? So
I think
although the state
that's
is
a good
doing
point.
some kind of benefit to the victims, yes, sir.
But if you see the real
So
accused,
like,
let's talk
although
about
the
crimes
funds,
against. Let's talk about white collar crimes. What do we see? See, indirectly, we are all the victims of a given white collar crime because it's a crime against the nation. It's a crime against the state. Should they, by virtue of their financial
yes,
position, pay all of us? They usually claim they run out of the country. Now, if we say that an accused who is wealthy should pay the victim and the state should not pay. See, we are all paying taxes. We are all contributing to the exchequer. So our funds are not isolated from that of the state. We share. Let's say there is a sense of some element of sharing with the state as well. We are totally dependent upon the exchequer for these things. They are dependent upon us and our taxes. So it's a mutually beneficial thing. And if the
yes,
accused is better situated to pay, you will come across several judgments of the Supreme Court where under Article 142, the Supreme Court has passed orders on exemplary quantum of compensation, where the Supreme Court has realized that the accused has that kind of pocket. Now, you will see how the Union Carbide matter was dealt. Now, wait and watch how this LG matter will unfold. The Vizag, the Vishakhapatnam matter, to the victims of crime and those who have actually been, affected. Whether it's a crime or not, that will unfold in the days to come. But the state has to immediately give compensation because the accused, and also understand the state has to immediately rehabilitate and compensate people. They cannot wait for the accused to pay. They cannot wait for the trial to end and then the accused will be made to pay. So in such situations, there is a duty and there should be a mandatory duty. The state cannot exonerate themselves from this duty merely because the accused happens to be a wealthy individual. I hope that helps.
Okay.
Answers your question.
Okay. Aditi, you can ask the question now to sir. Just hold on, Aditi. I'm unmuting you. And now you can ask Aditi. Aditi, are you hearing us? Your voice is not coming.
The judge of justice, then also they're allowed to give the compensation by the defendants.
Aditi, we are not getting your voice. Can you write the message so that I can tell the sir? So you can type us. Anyone else? So another question is from Radmani Saxena. He's asking that what about the compensation to the person who was into a jail for a longer period of time? He was under trial prisoner, and at the end, he get discharged from what he has been tried for. So does he fall into the definition of victim or not?
Unfortunately, that is not the case so far as victim compensation schemes are concerned right now. That is something. But as you recall, I had discussed the case of Rudal Shah in the beginning, where the courts had given this compensation, to the petitioner who was illegally detained. The Supreme Court had, in 1983 awarded the compensation of rupees 35,000 from the state exchequer. But cases like Rudal Shah are a part of judicial activism where, while using their inherent power, they've ordered the states to pay. But victim compensation schemes have, in my opinion, not been devised for those who have been accused of such offences or those who are incarcerated pending trials and subsequently turns out that they have not been, convicted. See, when we say conviction, there is a very thin line difference being in being convicted and being under trial, or are being prima facie being charge sheeted or arrested. So it's a very thin line difference. The state, unfortunately, in my opinion, cannot reimburse everyone who has been acquitted. It should be a very clear case of misuse of public authority. And Supreme Court does it every now and then. We have seen Supreme Court ordering compensation for such illegal detention. Rudal Shah is a wonderful illustration to that effect, where a lot of compensation. See, 35,000 rupees in 1983 was not a meager amount. That is to be considered as exemplary in terms of today's currency. I think that was a wonderful question.
So one more question. Smriti, you can ask the question.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Sir, you have said that monetary support is not enough, but no. Does the victim compensation scheme also talks about providing psychosocial counseling and for the victim as well as the family members? And like how you said about the victim impact statement and all, what about restorative justice?
See, again, a very good question. In so far as restorative justice is concerned, I think we have only been discussing that in the West with prominence. I don't know if we really. I know in theory we do discuss a lot of restorative justice in India. Restorative justice is the need of the hour. We need to restore them back to the society as if they were placed before the crime happened, so on and so forth. But that is technically, I think, a very, very difficult situation to arrive at, because it does take a lot of time for a victim to get back to their routine, if at all they are able to overcome the trauma. Now, going back to your former question about I think you were talking about interdisciplinary methods to help victims of crime by counseling, by psychiatric assistance, or what all those schemes are. They are generally a part of it. See, state legal services authorities, even courts now have access to counselors. The special vulnerable witness courts have access to counselors. There are so many interdisciplinary procedures out there to promote these things. It is presumed that, see, let's use an illustration over here. So far as victims of rape are concerned, there are NGOs, non-governmental organizations, who are then duty bound to promote access to such mental health professionals. These NGOs are required by law to assist them. Now, so far as compensation schemes are directly concerned, they do not directly address this issue, but it is implied that these experts are required to assist the victims of crime. There are specific channels out there. You can always apply for that. Even in crimes against women, there is counseling by DCW, NCW. All these organizations have now come out with their internal channels as well to promote access to mental health professionals and otherwise.
So another question is from Aditri Majumdar. She is asking whether the compensation can be provided to sexually assault victim immediately as that in case of gang rape or acid attack victim.
Yes, why not? 357A is wide enough. Even the Supreme Court directive, I think in Suresh and another, I will share the entire citation. Court at the stage of taking cognizance can award. 357 is very clear. If interim compensation is required, they can do that. And if you recall, there is a mechanism for the applicant also to make an application for interim compensation. They can totally do that.
So another is Shweta. Shweta, you can ask the question. I'm unmuting you. You can ask the question. Yes, Shweta, you can now ask the question, please. I think she has lost. She has lost the signal, sir. Another question is from.
I think Shweta Pathak is mute.
I have tried, but she has left it. So she will come and we will join it.
Hello.
Okay.
Yes, now you get Shweta?
Yes, sir. Is my voice audible?
Audible. Please.
Sir, since you were talking about rape, I just want to ask, like, in cases of domestic violence, rape, and sexual harassment, etc., generally we focus on compensation, which is given either in the form of monetary relief or medical treatment, which is specially limited to physical health. So, what about mental trauma? Like, there should be certain written guidelines, like what kind of compensation is required for mental counseling of such victims.
Yeah, I think that was one of the parameters. If you recall, we had discussed certain criteria for compensation. I will quickly share the screen to that effect again. See the criteria for compensation. It does talk about severity of mental and physical harm. That is always considered, Shweta. The severity, obviously, it has to be seen in totality. It can never be isolated to physical harm itself. Mental harm is always taken into consideration.
Right, sir. One question is from Tarushi Verma. She is asking that there are so many people who commit the crime, and most of them they take the bail, and they roam outside in the society due to lack of evidence and no CCTV footage, etc. How, matlab, she want to connect through victimology, ki how this amount to a victimization of the society. So how you will deal with such situations?
I think we live in a very different world, post-COVID world. We see how the entire country has now, started to release prisoners. We were appearing for UP government in Supreme Court, where the learned Solicitor General Tushar Mehta had argued otherwise, that no, prisons are not required to be decongested as such, because in case they go out, they are more likely to contract COVID-19, and it's going to actually contaminate the prisons. But the judicial discourse has otherwise changed. We are in the process of decontaminating prisons, and we really want to see how we are in a world where we're giving parole and furloughs and whatever way out to the prisoners to get out of the prison. So I really don't know if I should say that this is against the society, because even prisoners have basic human rights, and bail is again a matter of right at a stage where substantial investigation is over, or it appears to the court that the individual applicant who has applied for bail is unlikely to flee from the corridors of justice and will not be tampering with evidence. So bail doesn't really affect the society. Several precautions are taken at the time of bail, such as surety, personal bonds. Conditions are imposed by the courts. So we should not really mix two topics of compensation and bail. They are two separate issues altogether, even if they overlap.
One question is from Parthik Chaudhary. Basically, he is saying that he lives in such an area which is a very disturbed area, where AFSPA is being imposed. Yeah, for additional some special acts have been forced, and people normally do physical and mental tortures. So where these people who are facing these physical and mental traumas, where they have to go and file for their compensation.
This question is from Parthik Chaudhary.
Yes, Parthik Chaudhary.
That he lives in an area where armed forces acts have been imposed.
And he says normally people do some act, and they face physical and mental traumas. So how and who is liable to compensate such victims?
It seems Parthik is able to join us on video conferencing, which means he has access to Wi-Fi and 4G internet. Supreme Court today had set up a very high-level committee to scrutinize and see if 4G internet is required. But if Parthik is able to, I see Parthik very well appearing on 4G and very robust Wi-Fi. So I don't know, Parthik, you might want to double check if Armed Forces Act is applicable on your state. But if it's applicable, we would want to, see how to go about it, because unfortunately there is nothing to compensate you at this moment. And this is by no means an attempt to trivialize your question, Parthik. It's a very important question, obviously, that even people are victimized without a crime. See, like a case where victim feels victimized by virtue of state action. Now, should we go to the state saying that it's your action which has victimized me, now give me compensation? I don't know if we have reached that level of understanding where we can, seek compensation from the state for state's action or inaction. But people have time and again approached the Supreme Court. So, Parthik, if you feel your fundamental rights are being challenged, I really urge that you approach the High Court under 226 or Supreme Court trying to seek compensation for such issues. And I hope you have access to 4G internet and Wi-Fi very, very soon.
Okay. ठीक. Parthik is having this access because his father is into army, so he's into that army area. That's why he can
Oh.
have access to that. So another question.
That's even Parthik's father is in the army, and Parthik is also claiming to be
Part of the system.
victim of it's very surprising to me.
Another question, sir. Please, this person, please, you may ask the question. This Galaxy on 5 Pro, I don't know the name is not been written, but I am unmuting you. Please, you can ask the question.
Sir, my question is, hello?
Yes, you are audible. Ask the question.
Yeah. Sir, my question is, if a woman is in jail for a crime under IPC, and then in the jail she is being a victim of rape or acid attack, can she be claim compensation under victim compensation scheme?
Ma'am, I will say something. If you and forgive me my question if my answer appears to be a bit on the other side. See, a victim, you can say a woman can be a victim of some crime, but it's very hard for a victim to get because which ways I know that I'm saying this online, so I have to be very very careful the words which come out of my mouth. But technically, if male guard rapes a woman inside jail, yes, this requires an FIR to be registered. She's a victim. Jail or no jail doesn't make a difference.
Okay,
It's
sir. Thank you so
technically
much.
that way. And second, it is now the case that women prisons are only guarded by women guards, which makes rape a very improbable act. It's very, very difficult. And so far as acid attack is concerned inside the jail, I haven't come across even one case where acid was allowed access inside prison, where acid was taken inside the jail and somebody became a victim of acid attack inside the jail. If you happen to come across such incident, to get in touch, we will be happy to take up this matter. As a government lawyer, I will be happy to do it. I will take up the matter. So it's very unlikely.
Thank you. Any other question, please?